Actually, everything started with the series I watched. It's not like it's amazing on Netflix, or maybe most people watching it would give it a low rating, but I watched a series called The Good Place, and this series gave me an idea. Following that, I conducted a poll on Instagram. I will talk about The Good Place in a moment. I said, what if you were given a chance for a minute while you're alive, but you only have one choice? Imagine an angel appeared before you and said, I can show you both heaven and hell for a minute. You won't die, don't be afraid. Would you look at heaven or would you look at hell? In the poll, a high percentage chose hell. Probably because they have lost a bit of hope in the world. They think, at least let me have an idea of what kind of place it is when I go. But a survey is conducted in America, and in this survey, people are asked whether they believe in heaven. 72% say yes, I believe in heaven, meaning they say heaven exists. They ask the same people the question again. They ask, well, do you believe in hell? 54% say yes, and 46% this time do not believe, because people want to go to heaven. This has become such a huge and successful market that in fact even back in the Middle Ages, the Pope would issue people an indulgence. That is an indulgence, meaning a document for forgiveness, for the forgiveness of their sins. And thanks to this document, you can guarantee heaven while you are still on earth. So what happens to your body after you die? According to various beliefs, and we will look at ancient Greece, Egypt, Islam, the Torah, we will look at all of them. Is there a heaven and hell? And what kind of place is it when you go to heaven or hell? How have they depicted these, and what happens to your body after you die? There are two types of human death. Some are kept alive in some way despite brain death, while others have attempts made to extract a little bit of information from their brain despite cardiac death. There are experiments, but when the heart and brain die, you are dead. There is also the situation where one of the two stops. Relatives sometimes resist because they appear to be alive, but in the end, they are accepted as dead. After dying, sadly, I'm sorry to say, most of the muscles in your body relax. Because they relax, blood, urine, feces, and gases can leave your body beyond your control. Therefore, a somewhat messy death might be waiting for you. However, after you die, this doesn't concern you, because you no longer feel shame. However, in Anatolia, there are rumors that the dead speak or make various sounds after they die, which is actually due to the body swelling with microorganisms and bacteria after a certain period and the release of gases. In other words, moans or sounds resembling speech can come from their mouth. For the first 50 years after you die, you still have a bit of flesh, for better or worse. Microorganisms and bacteria are eating this flesh, but it's still there. When we reach the 70s, you only have your bones left, and between 100 and 120 years, you have nothing left at all. Poof! Of course, there are various beliefs where bodies can be preserved for thousands of years in different ways, such as by removing your internal organs and mummifying your body. There is even a donkey that died in a salt mine whose body has survived to this day. Your nails and hair continue to grow after you die, and they can grow quite a bit actually. There are men who have fathered children with their sperm after death, and even mothers who have given birth after death, which is called coffin birth. In other words, birth in a coffin. There are mothers who can give birth after they have died. So why are people so obsessed with what happens after death? Actually, I'll explain it in a moment, but let me give you a brief introduction. There isn't much information on this subject in the Bible or the Torah. Especially the description of heaven is scarce, and the description of hell is very, very scarce. There is almost none at all. But with the Quran, descriptions of hell and heaven and information about life after death increase significantly. If we look at the order of religions, in the Middle Ages, especially since people lacked any national sentiment, borders changed constantly. Anyone could just come and claim, this is my country, Nenikasi, and you never knew who was approaching you. It was much easier to govern people through religious sentiments. Religion was an easier way to make people obey. Things like the Crusades or the Islamic world declaring jihad were all possible because of this. And to be able to do this, you needed a person called the Pope. Of course, we are not necessarily talking about just Christianity, Orthodoxy, or Protestantism in every religious belief. Or Islam. In every religious belief, there is a leader, and this leader somehow attains wealth. In the religious beliefs of every country today, leaders are wealthy. The Pope has $15–16 trillion today. For you to understand what kind of figure this is, you need to compare it with the American budget. It is said that the money managed by the Pope, by the Vatican, is $15 trillion. Just $8 trillion of this is in Italian banks. Just think, it's a city, but it's richer than many countries in the world. So how did the church become so rich? Well, by collecting taxes from the people. How did it collect taxes? by using the fear of the afterlife. Because you are living in the Middle Ages. There are no schools, nothing. And someone comes to you and tells you to obey them. You wouldn't even take it seriously. They say, but you must behave well. You must behave the way I want you to. Look, this is what the New Holy Book says. The Bible has been subjected to a lot of corruption. So you ask, why should I behave well? Because after you die, there is a bad place like this. And there is also a beautiful place like that. This worked because people were already miserable. In the Middle Ages, most breakfasts consisted of beer soup. I'm not even saying beer, I'm saying beer soup. They were eating porridge with the lousiest beer. There was no breakfast culture in Europe during the Middle Ages. And people who were living in such poverty needed to believe that they would either be well after death or and they could exploit all the money they had from them. In the show The Good Place I mentioned, the first 10 episodes will be a bit boring. By the way, check out The Good Place's IMDb. Don't just dive in based on my recommendation, but the first 10 episodes might be a bit tedious. After that, a philosophy begins. I won't go into too much detail so as not to do what's called a spoiler. However, let me tell you this, people can get bored even in heaven. Let's think about it this way. You are in a tremendous, magnificent place. Everything you want happens. The reason many celebrities commit suicide in their 20s is that they become rich very early, have everything early, and then commit suicide. In other words, they get tired of life. And even if you exist as a soul, if you experience every beauty forever, what are you going to do after a certain point? That's exactly what is talked about in the final chapter of The Good Place. Maybe if you watch it, you'll see. What do beliefs say about heaven and hell? In the Old Testament, the Torah, and the Bible, there isn't really a hell that is heavily described. It only appears in one verse. And here Matthew describes hell as a fiery place. Actually, the hell we know, with layers of fire, was first described by Dante. In his work, The Divine Comedy, he describes hell as a place with layers. In the Quran, however, heaven and hell are described in great detail. Of course, since many people have translated this into modern Turkish, different interpretations can arise. In the Bible, when Adam and Eve are expelled from paradise, it is referred to as a garden, but whether it is a place on earth is currently being debated. Or is it a place outside of this world? They haven't described it in much detail yet. If you ask someone in Anatolia today, they can tell you a lot about heaven and hell, including superstitions, but when you go to Europe, they don't care as much or they don't have the knowledge. If we go back further to the Egyptians, ancient Egypt says that after the body dies, it goes to a constellation or planet like Sirius and continues anew, that the soul continues. So death is a recycling technique system. It's a bit different in ancient Greece. There is a river of decay. After you die, it's called the river Styx there. A boatman named Charon meets you there. If you give the boatman a silver coin, you can cross, and so on and so forth. That's why they would close the eyes of the dead and place a silver coin on them. In Islam, however, in the Surah Ar-Rum, it says he brings the living out of the dead and brings the dead out of the living, and the earth gives life after its death. And thus will you be brought out. Surah Ar-Rum, verse 19. There are many verses. There is a lot of detail about all of them in Surah An-Nisa. But for example, if you look at Surah At-Tawbah, in the 72nd verse, it says that for both believing men and women, Allah promises a paradise with eternal, meaning permanent, everlasting rivers of paradise. And you can stay in this paradise forever. Because there is one thing all beliefs have in common, which is that the concept of time is important while on earth, but loses its significance on the other side. Of course, some beliefs also say that there is no other side at all. Now, a question for you. What kind of life do you think there is after you die? Please write it down below. Let this be a research topic for another video. This way, let's also get an idea of what kind of world, or rather, what kind of life you think exists after death. I hope this video contained enough information to at least give you some ideas about what happens after death according to many philosophies. See you in the next video.